My name's Karen Locke. I am recording this second video about internal family systems, IFS. And this one's going to be about the roles parts play in IFS. And the three main roles that we're going to talk about are managers, firefighters, and exiles. And so to the left, we have our to-do list, which would be our manager parts. To the right, we have a distraction technique. Drinking is one distraction technique, and those are called firefighters. And at the bottom, we have this sad child that might represent our exiles. So I know some people get confused about the word part. Like if I say this part of me, or if I say I'm talking to a part, and like, what is that all about? So basically, parts are aspects of ourselves. So that's kind of the simple version of that. And at the top right here, we have this girl that's just having fun. And so some parts of ourselves are just integrated. So when we go into a party, we might just go into like our fun-loving parts, and just kind of that's an aspect of ourselves that's showing up. If somebody asks for our help, we might go into our nurturing part. And so if these parts are integrated into our personality, then we just go into them automatically. However, there are some parts of us that are kind of stuck in the past, that they're holding feelings that weren't processed. And so sometimes if we notice, like if we're yelled at work, and suddenly we feel like this big shame coming up inside, even though it's really not doesn't seem like it's in perspective to what's happening to us. If we feel that, then we might be with a burden part. And a lot of that times those were like shamed children parts inside of us. And so they are not as accessible as this young girl that just goes into the mode, because this part is kind of holding on to some old feelings and kind of feeling stuck in the past. And there are also parts, so that would be kind of this little girl would be symbolized for that. And there are also parts that are kind of, we go into them unconsciously because we're trying to fill a need instead of being just spontaneous because we are enjoying ourselves or because we're feeling something. These parts go into protective roles when they feel like they need to, and they took them over a lot of times when we were really young. So we might have like an angry defender part. So anytime that we're attacked, that we feel attacked, we feel this anger come up, and it's just kind of automatic. Or somebody who's displeased with us, we might go automatically into people pleaser mode and trying to make them feel better. And so these are actually unconscious, and a lot of times we call them protectors because they're trying to protect us from something that basically happened a long time ago, but they are unconscious and they kind of go into that. So I thought this girl on her computer might be a workaholic part that's just kind of like trying to get her things done. And so one thing to remember is that all of these parts have positive intent. So the integrated parts or the burdens or the unconscious parts, they all want to help us, even though it might not seem that way to others or to us. And so in internal family systems, we learn about how to get in touch with them, to learn about what their intent was, and how to heal and help them. So when we're children, one of the things that might happen is adults might not be able to meet our needs. They might have burdens of their own. They can't pay attention to us. They're too stressed. They don't have time. They might not know how. They might not have ever seen that from their parents. And so sometimes adults couldn't meet our needs. In addition to that, sometimes when we have feelings about that, like we're sad that our parent wasn't there for us, there might not be anybody to listen to that either. So we have big feelings when we're children, and we can't process them. We don't know how, or they're too big for us. And so feelings that are built up over repeated similar experiences tend to get stuck there. And so those sometimes we call our inner exiles because they were too big for us and we couldn't help them. And then the inner parts that develop to protect us from those feelings are the rest of our system. And so as we think about this, let's think about first our own parts that we can identify. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of my parts and give you a chance to think about some of yours. So let's say that you have a big project coming up or an important decision. You know, am I going to move? Am I going to be in a relationship with this person? There's a big decision or there's a big project and there's lots of pressure. So what are your coping skills? What do you usually do to kind of keep yourself on track, make sure that everything goes well? And I will tell, so one memory that I have is I'm a special ed teacher by day, and I had a notice one time that I was going to be audited by the state of Minnesota, and they were going to look for through all my paperwork to see which things were correct and which things weren't, and we would get a violation for every single thing that I did in the paperwork that was wrong. And so that was a lot of pressure for me. And so the first thing that actually came up for me was I procrastinated. I actively found other things to do. So that is one of my coping skills is finding other things that are very important suddenly. And then the second one was basically trying to control it. So I would be very thorough. I would try to read everything I could about this thing, and then I would do the paperwork. And so those were kind of two of my strategies. And so I would call them maybe a procrastinator part and maybe a controller part, making checklists and things like that. So so just think about yourself for a moment. Think about a big project or a decision that you kind of felt pressured, and what are your strategies that you sometimes use? So I'll go on, but you can put a pause if you want to think more about that. So here are some common ones. So some of us might have a perfectionist part, and this might cause multiple drafts of things because, oh no, that one wasn't perfect. I need to make it better. Sometimes people have people pleaser parts, so they go back to the person and they try to find out exactly what it is that would make you happy. Your parent, your teacher, your supervisor, trying to make it exactly like that. You might have a taskmaster that says, I cannot quit until I get this right. And so long hours, it's got to be good enough. And then the control part that I listed, trying to control everything about the project, being as thorough as you can. So there's all of those possibilities that managers might do. They also, if we're talking about dieting, they might be the ones that kind of think about, look for research the diet, write it all down, try to control that. So all of those things might happen with managers. And so the next type of part is firefighters. And they douse the flames of feelings. So what if your project or decision didn't go well? Okay. And so in my case, we did get some violations. And regardless of the fact that, oh, well, that's fewer the violations than some people got, it didn't really help me. And so I felt really, really bad about that. And so how do you distract yourself? How do you comfort yourself once the flames of feelings are high? And so obviously on this page, I'm showing one of mine is I eat. And so I think I got some treats for myself. And then I think I sat down in front of a TV because that's my second go-to. So TV and treats. And then actually I probably was reading Facebook while watching TV and eating treats. So those are three of my firefighters. So how about you? Just think for a moment, what happens with you if you don't do well, if something emotional comes up, what happens? So you can pause this if you want, but I'm going to go on to some examples of firefighters. So some of us turn to alcohol, shopping, foods, drugs, TV, any of those kinds of things that can become addictive. But we're trying to distract ourselves from pain or from feelings. Sometimes we blame others, and actually that's something I think I did. The State Department of Education is crazy, and I don't really need to listen to them. So some of us might do that. And then some of us might self-deprecate. Well, I'm not good enough. I'm just going to give up. Just shove the whole thing. I just can't do anything. So those would be firefighters. So the question then becomes, why do I need to know about these protectors, these managers and firefighters? And so one thing it can help is just understanding. So if we make a diet and then we break a diet, we can know that, so the managers and the firefighters are basically fighting each other in our systems, which happens a lot. We try to manage our ways out of things, and then when it doesn't work, we have behaviors that are out of control, which makes the managers feel out of control, so they get upset. So that's one of the things that happens. So just kind of understanding what's going on inside of us. The second thing is we actually can dialogue with protectors. We want to build a relationship with them. These people are all pulling in the same direction. If we and our protectors get together, then we can understand them. They can understand what we need and what our parts need. That will help us just be all on the same team rather than fighting each other. And then the third thing is, after we have a relationship with them, that will allow us to help heal those exiled parts of ourselves. So remember, there was when we had a child that's needs weren't met, and we kind of had exiled those into our bodies a lot of times so that we don't feel that feeling all the time. This will help us heal those exiled parts once the protectors relax. So how are we going to do that when we're all by ourselves and we don't have any other resources? So one of the things that IFS has discovered, internal family systems, is that we actually all have a self inside of us. And that actually once we start helping our parts, we get more into self, more into all of these qualities up here of compassion and calmness and confidence. Because when we unblend from those parts and their feelings and their overwhelming feelings, we have more clarity. We have more confidence. We can even be creative. Parts tend to see things from one vantage point, but our inner self, sees a lot of different things and is able to create more wholeness. So this is the center of us, the me that's noticing the parts, the me that's helping. So if you're seeing or hearing or noticing parts, then you're connecting with self energy to some extent. And so one way to get to our core self is to work with our parts. So a lot of people spend a lot of time meditating, and that is certainly a good way to connect with calmness and clarity and all of those qualities. And it doesn't help us necessarily to heal our parts unless we're aware that we have parts and that those need our work too. So these are the 8 main qualities of self with a capital S: compassion, calm, clarity, curiosity, confidence, courage, creativity, and connectedness. And all of those things sound like a wonderful place to get to, huh? And we can do that partly through working with our parts. So my suggestion is, if you want to try starting out with some of these things, is just notice different emotions this week, different impulses that come up in you, and just see if you can maybe categorize some of them into these types of categories. So notice when you begin feeling an emotion. And first thing might be to see where in your body you feel it. Sometimes that helps us if we are trying to concentrate on a part, trying to notice where in our body we're feeling it. It also might help us to see, so is there something that we're hearing in our heads? Are we telling ourselves something? Do we have maybe an image? Sometimes my perfectionist part looks like a school marm with a ruler, just kind of waving it at me. So you might have an image. So, and then if we're categorizing, just noticing especially fear and shame that come up, because those might be those exiled parts that couldn't process things when we were young. And then notice how you might be trying to prevent those feelings coming up. Those might be your managers. And then notice what happens if those feelings have come up full blown, and then what do you do to help yourself feel better? And those might be firefighters. And that's just starting to apply this knowledge for yourself. And the next video will be about how to connect with those parts more fully. So my name's Karen Locke, and my website is emotionalhealingcoach.org. And I have a couple of Facebook pages, Facebook groups that are working with internal family systems. So I'll post this there also. Thanks for visiting. See you next time. Bye.